Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Loracecere.
My name is Loracecere. I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and this is part of the ongoing podcast series of What Would I Tell My 25-Year-Old Self? Today, I'm interviewing Peter Gibbons. Now, Peter has had many roles, as he will tell you, and I think that I have interfaced with him in at least 5 of his roles, but he's now smiling and retired. So, Peter Gibbons, tell the group a little bit about yourself.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for inviting me on. It's always fun to work with you. So I've just retired after about 40 years. I spent 20 of those years in the specialty chemical industry, mostly in architectural and industrial paints, and with a company called ICI, and got to work in Europe, Latin America, and that's what brought me to North America, to the United States, thankfully. And that was followed, believe it or not, by 6 years at Starbucks, where I was head of global operations during the big transformation that took place at Starbucks in 2008, 9, 10. And, I don't know what the link is between specialty chemicals and coffee, but it seemed to work. Maybe that tells they're all roughly the same, but with their unique nuances.
Hey, caffeine is the best chemical, I think.
It is, it truly is. And I believe it's good for you, but I don't know. After doing so much traveling with Starbucks, having a lot of fun, I wanted to do something different. And I joined Mattel, the toy company, which was an absolute blast, and one of the friendliest, most engaging and analytical companies that I've ever come across. Believe it or not, Mattel, being in the toy industry, you have to be pretty analytical and technical, launching 8,000 products a year. And I got to run final product engineering and global operations there, and had a lot of fun, made some tremendous friends there. We spent a lot of time automating. We invested so much in automating our huge factories around the world. And then I got a call to go and start up a company for Goodyear and Bridgestone. I stood up Tire Hub, a $1 billion startup between 2 intense rivals, a last mile distribution company. And I was the CEO of that through all kinds of interesting startup stories, as I think you and I have shared some, and saw them through COVID, got them to profit and cash positive, and was thinking it was maybe time to climb off the horse and hang up my boots, so to speak, when 3M called, and they were looking for a operational transformation coming out of COVID. So I spent the last 3.5 years running global operations for 3M. A huge job, 43,000 people, 110 factories, and we managed a huge transformation there. And that's really my career. I've been really fortunate with great opportunities and worked for a lot of very smart, good people.
Now, Peter, you don't have as much of an accent now as when I first met you, but, I think you're originally from Scotland. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. And did you ever think you'd be in supply chain young growing up in Scotland?
Well, I thought I'd have some kind of technical career, and somehow I always thought I'd be in manufacturing. That wasn't in my family, but I somehow imagined myself being around things being made. Wasn't sure what those things would be. What I wasn't sure of was what the path to get there would be and how it would all play out. I always thought I would do okay. I didn't imagine that here I'd be living in the US 40 years later with my kids and grandkids and having got to work for some really iconic companies and brands.
And congratulations, you've had an impressive career. I think I first made contact with you when you were at Starbucks, and so it's been great to work with you over those years, and you've been a great supply chain leader. And if you were talking to that young boy in Scotland at 25 who thought maybe he would make things, what would you tell that 25-year-old self?
One of the things that I'd tell myself is don't worry too much about your career, that it's hard to mess it up, right? When I was thinking of myself at 25, if at 25 I wanted to be a professional soccer player in Europe, I'd blown it, right? That's not going to happen when you're 25. So unless that's the kind of thing you're worried about, your career evolves and takes twists and turns, and it's really about decision points. It's about there are moments where either a decision is presented to you, or you feel it's time that you really need to learn and do something else. And I have this strange saying I say to people is, be a little bit more, don't be patient, but be a little bit more patient, right? Because when you're 25, you're learning about the workplace, you're learning about how companies work, you're learning about what supply chain really is. And just make sure that whatever you do, you learn from it and you do it really well. And always participate. I say to young people all the time, don't sit in meetings and say nothing, because you can always ask a question. You can always help the process if the meeting gets bogged down. You can always help a colleague who's maybe struggling to answer a question. And you can always help the boss who's maybe struggling to get their point across. So find ways to participate, even though you might not have something really profound to add to the content. Be a participant and let people hear you, because that's how you get engaged and involved. And be a tiny bit patient, but not too patient. Opportunities will come. And it's not unusual to say, I don't really know where this will all end up. That's fine. Opportunities will always arise. Just spot those decision points and then be bold and make a decision.
So I hear be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. Participate, be willing to help, and, pull up a chair to the table, right? Have the courage to have a voice, right? What did you learn in your career?
If you'd met me at 25, Laura, you'd have seen someone who thought the answer to every problem was something technical. And, I went through a bit of a transformation in my 30s where it was always there in my heart, but I realized that actually this was all about people. The technical stuff came from unleashing people. But I became really interested in the psychology of how people operated. And, I morphed in my career to recognizing that the biggest thing I would ever be able to bring is being able to help, encourage, and lead people. And, as a leader, you're there to help a team be more successful. Because if the team doesn't need you, why have a leader? So you've got to add something to the team. And a big part of that is unlocking them and helping them find solutions, telling them what the problem is, giving them the exam question, and then being highly supportive. And if you'd asked me at 25, to me, it would all have been, engineering, science, equations, it's all about pragmatic decision making. And then you realize, there's actually a much more interesting challenge out there. It's how do you build a team? How do you select people? How do you motivate them? How do you encourage them? How do you make them free of fear and just be heroic? These people are pretty much heroic.
Well, Peter, a lot of being a leader is managing yourself, right? Mm-hmm. It's, self-discipline. And how did you learn the skills to do that? And what would you tell others?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best example from the beginning. Back in my first few years at ICI and think, how did they ever put up with me? Because I was too opinionated. I didn't necessarily ask the best questions. And I was always, engaged, involved, speaking up. But I had to sit back and realize that the people I was working for, they didn't seem to rush. They listened much better than I did. I think I turned out to be probably more interested in people than maybe they were. But the thing I really learned was this thing about you've got to be balanced, you've got to be open, you've got to show that you're not ruffled by situations. Good news, bad news, it's just the same. And particularly, this, Laura, in supply chain, there's a lot more bad news than good news, right? And if every time someone walks into your office and they get the scowly face if there's bad news, then they don't want to come and tell you things. And so you learn to create this balance because you experience that things happen. They're not usually the fault of people. The big things are more often circumstances and changes in circumstances. And believing that people are the solution and not the problem allows you to kind of have that little bit of separateness, be able to stand back a bit, be more calm, be more of a leader. But I had to learn that. I was not that at 25, I can tell you.
How would you characterize your leadership style that you developed?
I'm a great believer that transparency really matters, that having a team that feels that it's really open to talking about anything and everything, encouraging people that you've hired them to help solve the problem, but they don't need to know everything. As long as they can get everything on the table, you shouldn't expect people to have all the answers, but you can expect people to get everything on the table. And then, people frequently tell me, I'll be honest, right, that I'm very demanding, but there's a but or an and, that they appreciate my level of communication, how much I communicate, how supportive I am, and also that I try and bring a sense of humour to things, that I don't let things get out of proportion. And if you worked for me, you'd recognise that my thoughts about you don't change day to day. I'm not one of those people who you're up and down on the scale every day like the stock market. Once you've chosen someone, you've got to be even with them and let them know frequently that you trust them and you believe in them. And there might be very difficult things to talk about. That's business. But it's not about them, right? It's about the issue. So you be tough on the issue and kind to the person.
So when you think about your 25-year-old self and you knew you were going to make things and you ended up in leadership roles, what would you tell the 25-year-old self to focus on? Would it be something academic like, data analytics or system theory? Would it be something more around communication skills or understanding organizations? Where would you tell the 25-year-old self to focus?
So I would say to them that there are three things that will really help you throughout your career, and in no particular order. Number one, understand the financials. There's no mystery to a balance sheet and there's no mystery to a P&L. And while some people in the organisation will try and pretend there really isn't. So don't be shy to go and learn how the P&L works and how the balance sheet works. It's just math. That's all it is, right? And it'll hold you in good stead all your career. Second is, be interested and understand how people work, why they work the way they do, why people behave the way they do. Don't call it politics, call it behaviour, and be curious about the culture and how things happen, how things get done in your company, how people make things happen. Then the third thing would be, you've got to understand the physical processes. All the important analytical and technical skills matter, but fundamentally, if you're in a business that makes things, right, be curious about how do you make things? How do you specify things? How do you design things? How do the physical processes work? How does the logistics work? That all the stuff behind the scenes, like planning and analytics, is all really important. But somewhere a product is being made and sourced, if you're manufacturing, that is. And get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid to be down on the floor in a factory or a logistics centre, distribution centre. Talking to the people that add the real value, get in amongst the action.
When Laura, the 25-year-old self, was going through chemical engineering school, there wasn't a thing called supply chain. When did supply chain become a thing for you?
Oh, that's a super question. By the mid to late 90s to late 90s, companies had gone through 10 to 20 years of lots of change following the big recession in the early 80s. Manufacturing changed, headcount was reduced in lots of factories all around the world. Companies became much more efficient. And round about the mid-90s, people realised that squeezing each function individually wasn't really going to get the answer, that these things had to work together, that typically they worked separately. And it wasn't that it was bad, it's that people got to the conclusion, leaders got to the conclusion that if you want me to design for manufacture, then I need to procure for that in the same way. I need to get sourcing involved. That there's no point in having tremendous factories if your logistics are slow and inaccurate, and right, your logistics can't work unless you've got great business rules that make sure that lead times and lot sizes and customer requirements are clear. That planning gels this whole thing together. That if you want to drive inventory down and service up, you have to have people in planning who believe that instinctively. And that was really when I was I was in a big chemical company at that time. And I wouldn't say we discovered supply chain, but we realized that what we were doing had taken us so far and that we weren't going to get much further unless we started to join it all together. And then when I was at Starbucks, we joined the commercialization function into what we called supply chain. So it became commercialize, plan, source, make, deliver. And we joined the whole new product introduction process into it. And I think it was a logical conclusion of people trying various things, then realizing they'd made progress, but they needed to run the company in a much more end-to-end we're all in it together. We can't carve it up into silos.
Well, that's the late 1990s. And in our lifetime, we've seen a lot of change. The evolution of e-commerce, the evolution of big data analytics, the early introduction of artificial intelligence. What do you think was the biggest change that you experienced in supply chain in your career?
I think it's speed. I think all the things you just mentioned, e-commerce, AI, joining it all together, the speed at which we need to operate and the speed at which we need to change is so much faster, so much further ahead. And some of the problems we're solving, someone sitting with an Excel spreadsheet, no matter how smart they are, they can't do it. 3M is a great example. 110 factories with over 1,000 interplant connections. So that is a multi-echelon planning problem that humans can do okay. They can't optimize it. They just can't. It's just way too many variables, right? Of the technical processes we run nowadays in big complicated factories, the number of variables you're trying to tune to create a perfect product at speed every time. Again, a simple process control system can't do that. You need AI to keep learning every setting, every adjustment, and what created optimum product. It's just a different complexity and a different level of speed that's required to operate and react.
Well, and the ability to move at that cadence, right? It's like a different rhythm of supply chain that we have now than what we had in the 1990s. It's just a different rhythm. It's even got a little bit more staccato, right? Due to variability, So if you were interviewing somebody now and they were 25 sitting across the table, maybe even drinking a Starbucks cup of coffee, what characteristics would you be looking for?
Through curiosity, right? Genuinely curious to understand processes and people. Someone who is always going to be asking good questions. Someone who's got courage, right? To tackle the status quo. Who really is interested in making things happen. Right? I'm assuming they've got the technical strengths and intelligence, but are they someone that can make things happen? Will things happen around them? Are they collaborative? I mean, that today, certainly compared to when I first started working years and years ago, being able to collaborate is a much bigger skill. It's much more demanded nowadays than just fighting your corner 20 years ago, being able to collaborate across the enterprise. And then, genuine ability to be interested in learning how to communicate better, make things clear, make things simple, work with others. Those kind of things stand out when you're interviewing someone. Are they someone that's going to get on with other people, get things done, make things happen, and be curious about how do we change and evolve always?
Action-oriented, courage, someone that's working on communication skills. How do people work on communication skills? The research I've done, one of the biggest gaps is both oral and written communication, right? And many of the 25-year-olds that are trying to get into supply chain have spent their lives on a phone, not necessarily talking to people, right? How do you build those communication skills?
First of all, take them away from PowerPoint. Do not allow them to present using PowerPoint. PowerPoint is designed for the presenter, not for the person listening. And I would encourage people how to stand up and how do you make 3 really important points and how do you back up with data. I would encourage people to write clear emails about what the problem is, what the action plan is, and what are the expected results. Help give people a bit of structure to it. Give them some broad guidelines that help them practice. Because what people need is to practice, and they can't practice if we haven't told them what to practice. So, when I was running Tire Hub, for example, we had to help our leadership team learn how do you communicate to a board as opposed to other executives, and a board doesn't have time to check that all the data in your slides right. They don't have time to say, why is page 1 different from page 3? Why is that number? They don't have time for that. They need to know, what are you asking for? What are our options? What are the potential benefits and costs? And what are you recommending? And don't start it then by saying, this is what I want to do. You have to explain the problem. You have to show, what the options are, the cost and the benefits, and your recommendation. And it might sound really simple, but helping people create a structure for either verbal or presentation skills or written skills, help them, right? Help them, speak the language of business.
It's easier said than done, right? I write probably 3,500 words a day. And, I look back at my writing and I think I'm getting better, but, learning how to write, learning how to communicate is tough, right? And, when we talk about teamwork, Peter, there are different kinds of teams. There are swim teams, there are track teams, there are basketball teams, there are football teams. Each team works on a different set of skills and rules. And what kind of team do you try to build in supply chain? What kind of characteristics do you think it takes?
Yeah, so I truly believe that the kind of territorial, skills from the past, the kind of siloed kind of view, this is what I want to do, this is what I think. I think that's that. And as I build teams now, I don't want them to agree with each other all the time, but they have to get on with each other all the time. Right? It's absolutely fine to have a different point of view and to be able to express it. But, I don't want people who will just dig their heels in and say, here's what I want to do, because that's not what a supply chain team is. And what I've said to my teams in recent years has been supply chain by definition is teamwork. So the kind of siloed, territorial, must win kind of skills, that's not a team. And the whole point of supply chain is that every aspect, commercialize, plan, source, make, deliver, works together. So I challenge them and say, if you want to be part of supply chain, how can you not be a real team player? And there's nothing wrong with us debating how we're going to do something. That's absolutely great. There's nothing wrong with us asking for more information or asking for better insights or asking for more dialogue. But it has to be in the spirit of a common goal. And one of the things that I think we did really well at in my recent jobs, particularly 3M, was we would create together as a team our 90-day plan. So each quarter would start with us writing down 15 to 20 things that we as a team were going to achieve. And it could have been, number one would literally be, here's our safety target for the quarter. Number two would be finances, there'd be service. Then it'd be, and we need to hire someone for this job. We need to get that system implemented. We need to get that capital project finished. But it was very much, this is what we together, something between 15 and 20 items across a dozen people that we owned either individually or collectively, but that was our 90-day plan. Success was us collectively delivering that 90-day plan.
So would your team be a debate team?
A debate team. I think they were an action team.
An action team. Okay, so like a superhero team.
No, I wouldn't say superhero. I'd say action-driven leaders.
Action-driven.
Yeah, that we look to things, we'd say we want to be a problem, action, result team. Right? We define what the challenge is, we have an action plan, we deliver the result. And that we're not proud to ask for help, an extra resource. And it's not about the individual, it's about us looking at it in the end saying, yeah, someone maybe over-delivered because someone under-delivered, that's fine, that happens, and all balances out over time. Anything
that you've learned through failure or a story that you want to tell?
I look back at my career and there's a couple of moments where I should have asked for more. There are a couple of moments in my career where I realised that I could have gone to the CEO and said, hey, we're doing fine. If you need me to do more, I'd love to talk about it. And I say that as a regret because it's the advice I give people younger in their career. I say, relish what you're doing and don't be afraid to ask for more. Because the people that get on when they're in their early part of their career, number one, they get noticed because they work really hard, they relish the task. And secondly, by speaking up, saying, if there's more, I can do it. When a problem comes up or a project, those are the people that come to mind. And I've told that to so many people earlier in their career. And then I look back at my own career and I think there's maybe maybe two moments where I think, why did I not put my hand up and say, this is the time where you could add more to my portfolio? And I wouldn't call that a big regret because I did it pretty well. But I always say to people, try not to have regrets. When you're turning a supply chain around or you're doing a transformation, you don't want to have regrets, right? Give it all as a team, give it your best shot. You don't want to be the team that says, we wish we'd done this, we wish we'd moved faster or earlier or been more adventurous. Whatever you do, have no regrets.
Have no regrets and ask for more. Well, Peter, let's celebrate your career in supply chain. You've been a great supply chain leader, and hopefully in retirement, you're going to find a way to use those skills that you've got for leadership and communication. Thank you for being on the show today, and all the best.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed being with you again, Laura. All the best to you.
Thank you. So this is loracecere with Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. This series of What Would I Tell My 25-Year-Old Self will be an interview series with 25 supply chain leaders. This series is designed to help people in their careers and to think about how can they be better supply chain professionals. With that, let's say goodbye to Peter Gibbons and all the best.
Thanks so much. Take care.